It's almost midnight. You're sitting on the floor, back against the couch, and you didn't even hear yourself start crying. But your dog did. He was asleep 2 rooms over. Now he's pressed against your leg, ears back, not barking, not begging for attention. Just there. You've probably told yourself, this is just a dog being a dog. Maybe he wants a walk, maybe he smells dinner. But somewhere in his bloodstream right now, his cortisol is rising. The same stress hormone climbing in yours. So the real question isn't whether your dog notices you crying. It's whether he's feeling something at all. For a long time, the easy explanation was training. Your dog comforts you because you've comforted him. Treats after a knock at the door. Forgiveness however he approaches you afterward. Emotional response, reduced to a rehearsed transaction. Tidy story. Also wrong, or at least incomplete. In 2012, 2 researchers at Goldsmiths, University of London, Deborah Custance and Jennifer Mayer, ran a simple test. Owners and complete strangers sat in a room and either cried or hummed a tune. No script the dogs had seen before, no treats, no training cue, nothing to reward. Here's what happened. The dogs didn't just react to their own owner. They approached crying strangers just as fast as they approached crying owners, nuzzling, licking, pressing their bodies against a person they had met minutes earlier. If this were only about loyalty or learned reward, strangers should have gotten nothing. They didn't get nothing. They got comfort. So what does that tell us? Whatever happens in a dog's head when a human cries isn't really about who is crying. It's about the sound itself, and whatever that sound signals underneath it. Not a trained response to one specific person, a reaction to something closer to a category. And that's strange if you sit with it. We like to believe love is personal, that a dog's devotion is earned, one belly rub at a time, built specifically around you. But this experiment suggests something less flattering and more interesting. That dogs may be wired to respond to distress in general, the way you'd flinch at any sudden loud noise, not just one you recognized. Which raises a harder question than any stopwatch can answer. Is that reaction something a dog chooses to do, or something he simply can't stop himself from doing? 2 years later, at the University of Otago in New Zealand, psychologists Min Hui Yong and Ted Rothman went looking for something harder to fake than behavior. They wanted a number. They brought in 75 dogs and 74 humans and played each of them one of 3 recorded sounds: a human infant crying, a human infant babbling, or plain white noise. Before and after, they took saliva samples and measured cortisol, the hormone your body releases under real physiological stress, not performed stress, not polite concern, the kind you can't will yourself into. Here's the result. Cortisol rose in the humans who heard crying, and it rose almost identically in the dogs. Not with babbling, not with white noise, only with crying. 3 dogs from that study, an English setter named Mia, a border collie named Annie, a mixed breed named Flack, showed the same combination every single time: heightened alertness and a lowered, submissive posture, as if bracing for something. Researchers have a name for this: emotional contagion, a term the psychologist Nancy Eisenberg used back in 2000 to describe a primitive, almost unthinking form of empathy. Not the kind where you consciously imagine someone else's pain, the kind where their pain simply becomes yours, chemically, before you've had a chance to decide anything about it. Dogs, it turns out, are catching something from us. Not sympathy, exactly, and this is the part that gets me, something closer to contagion in the truest, oldest sense of the word. Like a cold, but made of feeling. This isn't the same as walking into a room, seeing someone crying and thinking, that person is sad, I should help. That takes a working theory of another mind, an idea of what's going on inside someone else's head. What Young and Rothman measured was older than that, blunter. No theory required, no reasoning, just one nervous system responding to the raw acoustic shape of another one's distress, the way a tuning fork rings when you strike its neighbor. And here's what makes it land harder. This wasn't limited to owners either. Strangers' recordings work too. Which means somewhere in a dog's evolutionary history, something got wired in deep. Not learned in a single lifetime. Carried. So the story isn't that your dog understands sadness the way you do. Actually, that's not quite right. Here's the more unsettling version. He might not need to understand it at all. His body just does it anyway. But wait. Before you decide every animal on Earth is quietly absorbing your sadness, there's a complication. And it comes from a very different animal, tested the exact same way. In 2024, A team led by Fanny Lehachki at Eötvös Loránd University in Hungary ran a version of the same experiment. Only this time, they compared dogs directly against mini pigs, another species humans keep as companions, another species capable of forming real attachments. Same sounds, same setup, crying and humming. The dogs again got stressed by the crying. That part held up, but the pigs didn't. Here's the twist. The pigs got more stressed by the humming, the unfamiliar, oddly musical sound, not the sad one. Lehachki's own explanation is almost anticlimactic. Humming is simply strange to a pig. Unexpected sounds are stressful on their own, regardless of emotional content, which means the pigs weren't ignoring sadness. They may never have been listening for it in the first place. So this isn't a story about animals broadly feeling what we feel. It's narrower than that. And honestly, more interesting. Dogs didn't get lucky evolution's blanket empathy. They got something bred into them, specifically, over roughly 15,000 years of living alongside us. Animals who survived and reproduced, partly because they were good at reading human distress, got to stick around. Pigs never went through that particular filter, which flips the question. Maybe the story was never, why are animals so emotionally in tune with us? Maybe it's, why did we, of all the species we could have brought inside our homes, choose the one already wired to catch our sadness, like a cold? There's one more study worth sitting with. It's the one that stays with me longest. In 2019, researchers at Azabu University in Japan, led by Mariko Katayama, studied dozens of dog owner pairs, Shetland sheepdogs, border collies, some house pets, some competitive agility dogs, and tracked how closely each dog's heart rate variability lined up with its owners over time. Not just whether contagion existed, how strong it was. And the strength, it turned out, wasn't fixed. It grew. The longer a dog had lived with its person, the tighter the synchronization. Not months, years. As if two nervous systems, given enough time in the same rooms, somehow learned to move together. The way two clocks on the same wall eventually, mysteriously, start ticking in sync. Picture an old dog, gray around the muzzle, slower on the stairs than she used to be. Her owner has had her for 11 years, through a move, a breakup, 2 jobs, 1 long illness. Nobody trained her to press her body against a crying person. Nobody had to. By now her stress response and her owner's rise and fall together like tide and shoreline. She doesn't need to interpret the tears. She simply already is what the tears are about. That's not obedience, it's not performance for a treat, and it's not some simplified fairy tale about animals having souls. It's slower than that, stranger too. It's 2 bodies, over 11 years of ordinary Tuesdays, quietly rewiring themselves around each other, until where one nervous system ends and the other begins, gets a little harder to say. Here's what gets me. Nobody designed that. It just happened. The way erosion happens. One shared morning at a time. Katayama's team didn't stop at heart rates either. They ran the numbers against personality data too, scored through owner questionnaires, and found the synchronization wasn't random. Dogs paired with more anxious owners tended to mirror them more closely. Not less. You might expect distance there. A dog pulling away from a stressed household. The opposite happened. The harder the owner's life got, the more their dog's body seemed to lean in, not out. Which means the comfort you feel from a dog resting its head on your knee during a bad week isn't incidental to the relationship. Years in, it may be the relationship. Built cell by cell. Breath by breath. Without either of you ever signing up for it on purpose. So the next time you're crying on the kitchen floor and your dog appears out of nowhere, pressing his whole weight against your leg, it's worth remembering what's actually happening underneath that. Not a trick he learned. Not a performance for approval. His cortisol is rising because yours is. His nervous system caught something off yours, the same way a room catches a smell. We like to tell ourselves, humans are the only species complicated enough to feel something we can't fully explain. But the dog at your feet is proof that's not quite true. He can't tell you what he's feeling. He doesn't need to. His body is already telling you. Maybe that's the part worth sitting with. Not whether animals feel what we feel. The evidence increasingly says some of them do. But what it means that we needed a lab, and cortisol, and 75 dogs in New Zealand, to believe something a dog had been trying to show us the whole time. One quiet head on one knee at a time. He was never guessing. He was listening. He still is.